The grand assembly shimmered beneath its artificial stars, a spectacle of opulence and technology that made lesser species tremble. Species that had transcended flesh, beings woven of plasma and code, monarchs of ancient star empires, all gathered in a single colosseum of power to decide the fates of trillions. And among them, for the first time, stood a delegate from Earth. Humanoid, biological, still using vocal cords to speak. It was almost quaint. He took the platform, expression unreadable, body language restrained but deliberate. There was no holographic flourish, no genetic signature display, no psionic projection of lineage. Just a man with eyes that had seen too much. "You will regret provoking us," he said. Silence followed, not out of fear, but disbelief. Then laughter erupted. Not just polite chuckles or diplomatic snickers, but full-bodied, derisive mockery. A being of crystalline thought formations flickered with amusement. A 10-eyed gas titan gurgled out waves of sonic mirth. Even the cold-blooded machine species issued sarcastic subroutines mimicking applause. The Speaker of the Assembly, a being who'd lived through 5 supernovae and 3 genocides, leaned forward. "Earth," he said, "you are a Category 3 planet that only recently discovered FDL. You have no say here. You're a petri dish of war, apes barely out of your cradle. Go home. Before you get someone important hurt." The delegate didn't flinch. He simply scanned the room. "You mistake silence for weakness. Our restraint for lack of capability. But we have recorded your slave trades. Your abductions. Your cultural theft. Your experiments on our children." Someone interrupted. "Oh please. Every world goes through that. You're lucky we even acknowledged your signal. You should be thanking us for bringing you into the fold." "No," the human replied. "You should be praying we don't leave it." Security systems hovered nearby, non-lethal drones glimmering. A few assembly members gestured to have him removed. But before the order came, he turned and walked out without permission. Unshaken. No further words. A few laughed again. Typical Earth bravado. But others, the quieter ones, those who paid attention to patterns, stared at the exit in thought. Because something about that warning lacked desperation. It sounded, if anything, like a countdown. News spread fast, as it always did in galactic society. Memes mocked the Earth ultimatum. Entertainment channels dramatized the incident as satire. Earth was portrayed in simulations as a backwater infested with primitive emotions and irrational aggression. Their species had murdered each other for centuries, polluted their own world, and still believed in personal gods. It was comical, pitiable, even grotesque. Yet behind the curtain, exploitation ramped up. Earth's resources were declared communal assets under interstellar stewardship. Galactic corporations descended, harvesting oceans, ores, and even DNA samples under legal pretext. Earth's protests were met with citations. And when a human colony near the outer rim resisted, calling for sovereignty, it was swiftly dealt with by peacekeeping mercenaries. Civilians were relocated. Some never returned. A few vanished into the galaxy's black markets, slavery hidden beneath bureaucracy. Still, Earth did not retaliate. No public outburst. No declaration of war. Not even diplomatic escalation. Earth simply went quiet. Trade routes with Earth ceased. Scientific collaboration offers were withdrawn. The Sol system encrypted its FDL beacons and refused all incoming transmissions. Satellites orbiting Earth were found destroyed, by their own command. Some chalked it up to embarrassment. Others believed Earth realized its insignificance and retreated. A few speculated they were building something in secret, but were dismissed as conspiracy theorists. After all, what could a species that once worshipped fire and fought over rocks possibly do? Then reports emerged from fringe territories. Small outposts where humans were being detained, gone. Not destroyed. Not invaded. Gone. Stations silent. Entire populations untraceable. Orbital footage corrupted. No records of ships arriving or departing. An exploration vessel investigating the disappearances returned without its crew. Only one survivor remained, a soldier from the Gorgory Pact. He was found drifting, dehydrated, barely coherent. His message was simple. They don't fight like us. They don't think like us. They burned us with our own weapons. Then they waited, until we begged. The report was dismissed by the assembly. But security measures quietly increased. Borders tightened. Unofficial orders were given: observe humans, but do not engage. And still Earth said nothing. The galaxy continued, arrogant and unafraid, but watchful. Cultural archives began to re-examine Earth's history. Wars that killed tens of millions. Doctrines of total annihilation. Psychological profiles that indicated humans would die for abstract concepts. Martyrdom mixed with vengeance. Forgiveness optional. Forgetting impossible. One archive unearthed a Terran phrase: "Do not mistake my silence for ignorance. My calm for acceptance. My kindness for weakness." That phrase began circulating on subspace channels. Mostly as a joke. But not everyone laughed. A high-ranking Zentari general quietly halted all missions near Earth-controlled space. A merchant guild blocked human slave trade, citing unpredictable risk assessment. A few planets began purging human samples from their biotech labs. Just in case. But it was too late. Because Earth had already seen enough. Heard enough. Calculated the ratio of offenses to reparations, humiliation to respect. And they had decided. Not on war. Not on justice. Correction. They would correct the galactic order. Not as conquerors. As a warning. One the galaxy would never laugh at again. It started with the outer colony of New Kyoto. A quiet human settlement built on trade, agriculture, and research. Population, just under 300,000. Defenses, minimal. The kind of place the galaxy assumed humans would scatter like insects if pushed. The Varnak Syndicate, a pirate faction with unofficial Senate backing, struck hard and fast. They expected surrender. What they got was resistance that bordered on madness. Within the first hour, the Varnak lost 3 dropships, not to orbital weapons, but to sabotage. Civilians, engineers, and farmers used improvised explosives, magnetic traps, even oxygen pipeline overcharges to blow boarding parties apart. A group of students led a charge using jury-rigged plasma torches, cutting through armored mercenaries with no formal training. Entire buildings collapsed with perfect timing, burying invaders alive. When a Varnak officer demanded the surrender of a neighborhood, a 12-year-old responded with a Molotov and set his body ablaze. That child's face was later found painted on a wall in human blood. Try again. By the second day, the Varnak withdrew in disgrace. They had come to enslave and left with half their force dead, another third crippled, and no prisoners taken. The human survivors didn't celebrate. They began transmitting a single message to Earth. Not a cry for help. A statement, they came. We held. Awaiting further action. The Galactic Senate responded with silence. Internally, they debated whether to sanction the Varnak or double down. Externally, they condemned unsanctioned violence and primitive retaliation unbecoming of a civilized species. They cited human aggression as the root of the escalation. No reparations. No apology. Earth's response was not a declaration of war. There was no speech. No parade. No anthem. Earth simply stopped talking. Embassies were closed. All human personnel off-world recalled. Interstellar commerce flagged. Human consulates deconstructed overnight. Galactic AI noted an immediate drop in communication traffic from the Sol system, followed by a data spike in encrypted transmissions no system could trace or decode. On backchannel networks, human code began to appear, silent, recursive strings buried in sublayered quantum packets. Nobody could read them. But the signature was unmistakable. Earth was watching. And planning. Then the disappearances began. 3 border outposts near the Krav Union went dark. No explosion, no distress signals. Their systems simply powered down, leaving nothing behind but drifting hulls. Medical data found later showed every inhabitant died from internal hemorrhaging within seconds, causes unknown. No attackers. No survivors. A freighter convoy carrying Terran minerals vanished en route to the Andariai trade route. When a salvage crew arrived, they found the lead ship intact, systems online, engines operational. No crew. Blood smeared along the walls. The word underestimated etched with a vibroblade into the bridge ceiling. Soon after, a scientific station orbiting a pulsar was found sterilized. The internal temperature had been flash frozen to absolute zero before atmosphere venting. The human researcher who'd been held there had vanished. Galactic forensic teams couldn't even determine the method of attack. The station had a Class A defense rating. It didn't matter. Whispers of black ops and psychological warfare grew louder. An intercepted fragment of a mercenary transmission became infamous. We don't know what they're using. It's not weapons, it's fear. You don't see them. You just stop waking up. No human ships were seen. No patterns emerged. No targets repeated. But every strike had meaning. Each victim had mocked, attacked, or enslaved humanity in some form. The galaxy began piecing it together too late. The Varnak homeworld was next. Not hit. Gone. Telescopes recorded a gravitational anomaly, then static. No debris. No planetary signature. One moment it existed. The next it didn't. Galactic panic set in. The Senate tried to reach Earth. Nothing. Broadcasts, envoys, AI communications, all met with silence. Not even refusal. Just black space. A few desperate factions attempted to retaliate by assembling joint fleets. They never got the chance. Human infiltration units leaked classified fleet trajectories before the ships even launched. Then, those fleets never arrived. Entire NAV comms were compromised. Pilots found themselves warping into empty space, their vessels shut down mid-flight by internal sabotage. In one case, a full crew awakened to find their weapons disabled, coordinates scrambled, and all logs erased. Each member had a message burned into their bunk: "We warned you." At this point, fear shifted into something deeper. Not just of Earth's technology or military capability, but of its intent. The galaxy had faced war before. But this wasn't war. This was surgical, deliberate, slow. Every response by Earth had precision beyond reason, vengeance without emotion. There were no civilian casualties on their side. No collateral damage. Just disappearance, silence, and messages etched in horror. A Zentari colonel publicly asked what the galaxy had done to provoke this. A historian answered, "We enslaved them. Mocked them. Took their people. Laughed when they asked for dignity." The colonel scoffed, then was found dead the next day, impaled on his own ship's hull in vacuum. The death was ruled a suicide. No further questions were asked. The galaxy began to understand it was not dealing with a newly emerged species demanding recognition. It was dealing with a predator that had been forced into the corner and finally decided it would no longer play prey. And it didn't roar. It whispered. It disappeared. It dismantled systems with quiet patience and terrifying resolve. Trade with Earth ceased completely. Attempts to scan Sol were met with recursive loops and sensory corruption. Drone probes lost connection the moment they crossed into the heliosphere. A ship tried to breach Mars orbit. Its own AI turned on the crew and vented the vessel. No evidence remained. Then a message finally came. From Earth. A simple audio pulse. "We are not retaliating. We are correcting. What you did to us was not forgotten. You taught us how this galaxy works. Now, you'll experience our interpretation." It lasted 6 seconds. But it echoed across every major network. Unblockable. Undeletable. 1,000,000 copies embedded into systems worldwide. Within hours, several planets declared neutrality toward Earth without ever being asked. Others shut down black sites holding human subjects and offered repatriation. It didn't help. The repatriated humans didn't speak. They just returned home. And still Earth had not deployed a single fleet in open combat. But the galaxy knew the truth now. The silence was not peace. It was aim. The first strike came without warning. No transmission, no threat, no demand. A known slaver planet in the Rigel Belt went silent in less than 13 minutes. Surveillance logs later showed flashes in the atmosphere, then a total blackout. By the time the nearest patrol arrived, the world was in ruins. Cities reduced to glass, communications severed, orbiting defense stations cut into precision segments. No life signs. No orbiting debris from attackers. The system's satellites had been hacked to self-wipe after transmitting one message across the open galactic net. Asterisk, we heard the screams. Asterisk. The planet had been a hub for human trafficking. Children sold as lab subjects. Workers used in asteroid mines. Executives had boasted of Earth's durable biotypes. Now, none of them remained. Their names were erased from planetary archives. Their capital tower split in half, its internal structure twisted outward like an exploded flower. Scientists concluded the destruction required power equivalent to a localized star-killer weapon. Yet there was no radiation trace. No fleet signatures. Just absence. Precision beyond comprehension. Within days, 2 more targets fell. Both had participated in human experimentation. Both were sterilized with surgical completeness. No planetary damage beyond intended zones. Civilian infrastructure untouched. Victims? Exclusively those responsible for crimes against Earthborn. Each body found impaled, burned, or frozen in a unique display of methodical death. One lab world had 674 corpses, each with a nameplate fused to their chest, matching their Earth victim logs perfectly. Someone had done their homework. The galaxy's intelligence communities panicked. This wasn't terrorism. This was targeted annihilation paired with perfect knowledge. Files believed secure were compromised. Locations thought hidden were uncovered. Human infiltration wasn't speculative anymore, it was operational. 100 theories bloomed, none useful. Were they using AI? Psionics? Time dilation tech? No one knew. It didn't matter. Their results were undeniable. Systems were failing faster than anyone could react. The Senate called an emergency session, proposing defensive coalitions. But fear had already shattered unity. Border worlds began refusing military conscription. Civil unrest rose as populations questioned why they had ever participated in Earth subjugation. Whispers spread that no defense mattered. That no force would be enough. Entire fleets were grounded not from logistics, but despair. A broadcast emerged from a smuggler vessel attempting to evacuate from the newly fallen world of Voker 7. It played once before its origin vanished. The voice was human, calm male. Asterisk, this isn't revenge. This is your lesson. We are your consequence. Asterisk, the final image showed a crater in the shape of a human fingerprint embedded into the planet's crust. Panic mutated into horror. The next target was unexpected, a floating trade station in neutral space. It had no direct link to crimes against Earth. But the reason for the strike became clear when its black site cargo was exposed. Humans. Cryo-frozen. Labeled biological curiosities. The facility was destroyed from within. Not bombarded, imploded. Engineers later found evidence of sabotage dating back nearly a year. Meaning Earth had planted agents before their delegate ever spoke at the assembly. They had been preparing, watching, calculating, long before anyone realized. Humanity wasn't reacting. It had been planning. Every move, every silence, was part of an unfolding design. The galaxy was just now catching up to the fact that the game had started long ago. On 10 different planets, fragments of a single phrase began appearing. Scratched into metal walls, carved into stone, burned into server cores. No pattern, no origin. Just 5 words, you should have listened. The phrase became an omen. Civilians abandoned cities at the first sight of it. Governments collapsed under the weight of rumors. Entire economies redirected resources just to defend against an enemy they couldn't see. A wealthy corporate world attempted to bribe Earth through unofficial channels. They received no reply. Days later, their central banking node melted from the inside, deleting trillions of credits. A fleet dispatched to investigate never reported back. Later, a human symbol was found etched onto the moon's surface in molten glass. Not a message. A signature. For the first time in recorded galactic history, established empires began suing for peace, without a war even being declared. They sent envoys. They offered reparations, apologies, treaties. Earth ignored them all. Not out of arrogance, but indifference. The galaxy had become a classroom, and Earth was administering exams. Only those who passed through fear or foresight would remain. A resistance faction tried to rally the remaining superpowers. They argued Earth must be countered through a united front. 50 ships were assembled. The operation was leaked. Every ship vanished from sensor range simultaneously. Hours later, their hulls were found drifting in the upper atmosphere of Saturn, sliced and gutted, hanging like trophies. No one had even seen Earth launch. Fear turned into reverence. Some began worshipping humanity as mythological avengers. Others blamed them for dark prophecies. Cults formed around captured Terran artifacts, believing proximity brought protection. One world changed its calendar to count from the date of Earth's last message. The galaxy was no longer in control. It was kneeling, some in submission, some in dread. And Earth still had not spoken again. Still no declaration. No demands. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to deliver a message in actions. Their victims had laughed at warnings. Now, they couldn't even scream. The galaxy watched helplessly as Earth redrew the map with erasure, not conquest. Territory wasn't claimed, it was silenced. Borders weren't redrawn, they vanished. And every time another world disappeared, the question grew louder: when will they come for us? The answer never came. Only the soundless echo of vengeance measured not in war, but in precision. The first visual record of a chimera surfaced from the wreckage of a Dominion black site. Footage recovered by emergency responders showed a figure moving through fire without a suit, body armored in something no database could identify. It wasn't metal. It wasn't fabric. It moved with him, pulsing faintly. The chimera didn't carry a conventional weapon. Its limbs extended, fractured, reformed. One strike snapped a fortified blast door in half. The footage ended with the recording drone being crushed underfoot. 17 Dominion scientists were found dead. 0 energy weapons detected. No signs of orbital support. The attacker walked through an active war zone and left nothing but silence behind. Intelligence analysts couldn't classify it. DNA traces were human, barely. Enhanced mitochondrial density, redundant organ systems, synaptic pathways operating 11.6 times faster than baseline. Whoever engineered it had rewritten biology itself. Not machine. Not clone. Not natural. Designed. The program was labeled internally as Chimera Protocol. Not a myth. Not a theory. A classified evolutionary response. The result of Earth deciding that diplomacy was obsolete. A contingency that merged their greatest asset, human adaptability, with every weakness the galaxy had shown them. Galactic species evolved in stability. Predictable climates. Homogeneous cultures. Systems optimized for safety. Humanity did not. Earth bred chaos. Its gravity crushed bones. Its diseases taught immune systems to mutate on command. Its predators taught early humans to sense danger before it appeared. That chaos became culture, then weaponry. Chimeras were not products of a lab. They were born in it, raised in war simulations, trained not with obedience but autonomy. Each one embedded with scenario processors, letting them simulate thousands of reactions before making a move. Not AI-driven. Not predictable. Terrifyingly human. But stripped of mercy, delay, hesitation. One chimera was dropped on Vekari Prime, a fortress world with multilayered shielding and planetary interdiction fields. In under 6 hours, their entire defense grid collapsed. Not destroyed, overridden. Manual control bypassed. Biosecurity systems misread the chimera as planetary leadership. The shields deactivated themselves. No casualties beyond the garrison. Every capital ship launched to respond self-destructed in orbit. The creature transmitted a final message before extraction. Asterisk, you're not protected. You're exposed. Asterisk. That message spread faster than any news. For the first time, planetary governors began evacuating preemptively at the mere rumor of a chimera sighting. Armies surrendered without contact. Civilian colonies purged their own military facilities to avoid being mistaken as targets. The fear wasn't from destruction, it was the knowledge that destruction wasn't necessary. Earth wasn't out to win battles. It was reprogramming an entire civilization to understand consequence. Captured analysis from a failed assassination attempt revealed details. Chimeras are functionally unkillable by standard galactic weaponry. Cellular regeneration happens faster than tissue damage. Internal nanite swarms self-repair without external signals. Neural backups activate even if brain death occurs. One unit reportedly continued mission operations after decapitation, using peripheral vision from a scout drone before reattaching its own head. The report was deemed exaggerated, until confirmation footage surfaced from 5 separate angles. There was no armor pattern, no standard loadout. Each chimera adapted to its environment, incorporating local materials. On an ice world, one grew thermal reactive skin that melted ice on contact. On a gas giant station, another became chemically inert to float freely inside hazardous chambers. No two were alike. That was the point. Every countermeasure failed. Energy shields bent around them. Psionic detection read them as void signatures. Biological sensors flatlined at their approach. Even time warp barriers failed to predict their trajectories. Some whispered Earth had discovered something beyond physics. But the truth was more brutal. Earth had studied the galaxy's tech long enough to bypass its assumptions. And then forged weapons that didn't just adapt, they evolved between encounters. Worse, Earth didn't mass deploy them. Chimeras were rare. Select. Each one was a scalpel, not a hammer. And that made the galaxy realize something far more terrifying. If this was Earth's precision tool, what were they keeping in reserve? Entire think tanks restructured to anticipate chimera deployments. A new military branch was formed in 5 star nations dedicated solely to nonlinear threat mitigation. Their funding surpassed planetary defense budgets. None of it mattered. Within weeks, the branch reported back, nothing can be done. The only guaranteed method of survival was non-engagement. The concept of deterrence collapsed. Earth wasn't retaliating, they were demonstrating. Chimeras weren't a weapon system. They were a message, we can reach anyone. Anywhere. Anytime. And we only need one. Even worse was their discretion. Civilian populations were left untouched. Children unharmed. Infrastructure intact. Targets were always surgical, deliberate, morally weighted. They weren't monsters. They were judgment. A former Senate archivist summarized it best during an emergency press conference. They've made ethics into a targeting system. Galactic morality, always treated as optional, suddenly became survival policy. Empires began rewriting laws to outlaw exploitation, fearing chimera response. Slavery collapsed as an industry overnight. Even illegal AI experiments were halted under rumors of observation incidents. Recordings found with unidentified human voices inside supposedly secure labs. Every attempt to capture a chimera ended in failure. On one world, a trap was laid involving null void fields and anti-life radiation. The chimera walked into it willingly. When the field deactivated 12 seconds later, the operators were dead. Internal footage showed nothing. Not a frame of movement. They were alive one moment. Gone the next. The only audio left behind was a whisper, you can't trap what's already inside. It became evident Earth had developed not just a soldier, but an ecosystem of vengeance. Biological, digital, psychological. The chimera was just the apex. Beneath them, support systems embedded in galactic networks, human AI dormant in foreign systems, sleeper code written in old trade software. Earth wasn't moving pieces. Earth had already won. The galaxy was just catching up to the moment their game ended. And yet, not a single formal war declaration was made. Not a single planet claimed. Earth wasn't conquering. They were purging. Selectively. Precisely. As if checking names off a ledger written in blood. Varaxis Prime had never known fear. It was the administrative jewel of the Central Galactic Territories, home to the bureaucratic elite and insulated from every consequence of the Senate's decisions. Its orbit was guarded by 3 concentric defense rings. Its atmosphere was laced with surveillance clouds. Its ground-to-orbit weapons were capable of disintegrating dreadnoughts. There had never been a successful breach in 4 centuries. It had become a symbol of untouchability, an architectural shrine to supremacy. The warning arrived as a time-stamped transmission. No voice, no demands, just a countdown embedded in the sky grid. 7 standard days. It pulsed on public billboards, private networks, corporate towers. Attempts to delete it failed. It regenerated faster than quantum processors could suppress it. Within minutes, it was everywhere. The phrase below the timer read, "You still think we won't?" The Senate dismissed it as terrorism. The planetary leadership echoed the same line, psychological warfare, nothing more. But the citizens weren't convinced. They had seen the blackouts, the disappearances, the silent swallowing worlds that once mocked Earth. Veraxis had stayed silent, confident that it was too important to be touched. That illusion ended with the timer. On day 2, traffic congestion spiked as shuttles attempted to leave orbit. Permits were denied. Panic hadn't officially started, but the fear was visible in every decision. Military drills increased, emergency bunkers opened, sensor arrays reconfigured to maximum sensitivity. But nothing showed up. No ships. No signals. Just the countdown, now fused into every reflective surface through unknown means. By day 5, evacuation began in secret. Government officials prioritized themselves. Civilian transport ships were denied launch clearance. When riots erupted, planetary enforcers opened fire. The skies of Veraxis, once symbols of ordered prosperity, now echoed with sirens and screams. On day 6, the timer changed. It began to accelerate. Hours vanished in seconds, as if time itself had been hacked. By the time the authorities realized it wasn't a glitch, it was too late. The bombardment began at local midnight. It wasn't kinetic. It wasn't nuclear. It wasn't even detectable until impact. Beams of focused force sliced from orbit in absolute silence, severing infrastructure without heat or shockwaves. Towers imploded from within. Entire city blocks folded downward like crushed fabric. Targeted annihilation, no randomness, no collateral, no wasted fire. One by one, planetary defense systems failed. Not through assault, but collapse. Command relays shut down in sequence. Backup grids overloaded by their own failsafes. Human-origin malware triggered chain reactions in ancient firmware. The orbital defense rings turned on each other, mistaking friendly assets as hostile. The sky became a canvas of falling debris, raining onto capital districts with surgical purpose. Government bunkers were breached with surgical airburst penetrators. No radiation, no chemical trails. Just pure force, directed, concentrated, untraceable. Officials found themselves exposed as ceilings vanished. The people who once ordered planetary-scale exploitation died mid-command, buried beneath their own arrogance. What shocked observers was not the destruction, it was the control. Earth had the capability to destroy Veraxis entirely, to turn it into ash. But they didn't. Instead, they performed a live dissection, layer by layer, cutting out every symbol of galactic supremacy. The planetary AI core was deleted, not disabled. Banking centers erased from orbit. Cultural archives overwritten with a looping phrase, "You laughed." The planet's major spaceport, once the most trafficked in the quadrant, was leveled into a single flat sheet of glass. Its curvature matched Earth's gravity constant. No bodies were recovered. No structures left standing. No crater. Just a polished, perfect surface, left as a deliberate monument. A few survivors managed to transmit distress signals. They described the feeling of being watched, not from above, but from within. Internal systems began playing audio from human historical broadcasts, speeches about resistance, freedom, vengeance, interlaced with images of Earth's war-torn past. As if Veraxis was being forced to relive the origin of the monster it helped create. Hours after the attack ended, a single encrypted data packet was delivered to the remaining Senate servers. It contained every criminal action Veraxis had authorized against Earth over the last century: names, coordinates, faces, transaction records. The evidence was complete. Earth hadn't just retaliated. It had judged. With full awareness. With methodical restraint. And absolute conviction. Across the galaxy, the message spread faster than hyperlane traffic. The once untouchable planet had been cracked open and left breathing, a half-destroyed symbol of humiliation. Other capital worlds scrambled to reassess risk. Some began dismantling slave operations overnight. Others purged genetic experiments. Entire fleets changed patrol routes to avoid human-claimed systems. No one declared war. No one retaliated. The truth was obvious. If Earth could break Veraxis, then nowhere was safe. What followed was a wave of political implosion. Factions accused each other of drawing Earth's ire. Treaties dissolved. Proxy wars froze. Defense alliances failed to form. Everyone was too afraid to look like a target. Governments collapsed under their own fear. And through it all, Earth said nothing. There was no gloating. No demand for territory. No offer of terms. Veraxis had not been conquered. It had been demonstrated. Not as a tactical necessity, but as a psychological doctrine. Earth wasn't challenging the Senate. It was redefining the cost of mockery. The phrase etched into the crater outside the ruins of the Veraxis Council Hall said it all. We don't need to rule. Just to remind you who bleeds. The aftershock of Veraxis Prime's fall wasn't measured in damage, but in silence. News networks, once filled with endless debate and mockery of Earth's threats, cut their feeds. Politicians refused interviews. Former critics vanished from public life. No declaration of war had been made. No footage of Earth's forces existed. But the galaxy understood something fundamental had changed. Earth was no longer a nuisance. It had become an existential force, and no one knew where it would strike next. Entire systems entered lockdown on speculation alone. Rumors became law. If a colony even whispered of past offenses against humans, governments abandoned it. Populations fled planets en masse just for housing a single Terran refugee. Asteroid colonies scrubbed themselves of any history of human exploitation. Anything linked to Earth became radioactive. Markets collapsed overnight. Black site economies built on Terran slavery vanished. Biological research on human samples was buried or deleted. Contracts were shredded. Corporations declared neutrality and issued public apologies to no one. Earth wasn't responding to communications, but everyone started confessing anyway. Cults began forming. Not around gods, but around human mythology. Sects emerged worshipping Earth as a divine punishment. Some called them the Flamewalkers. Others referred to them as the silence that judges. They preached that Earth was the universe's immune system, its final answer to unchecked arrogance. Their followers multiplied daily. Even former enforcers of the Senate converted, claiming visions of planetary fires and voices that spoke only one sentence: remember the laughter. In Senate chambers, paralysis took hold. Debates devolved into blame. Factions turned on one another, accusing each other of drawing Earth's wrath. Empires that once traded in fear now sat in terrified gridlock, waiting for their turn to be erased. The very notion of superiority began to unravel. Earth's silence became unbearable. It wasn't just absence, it was dominance. The galaxy realized Earth didn't need to respond because it didn't consider the galaxy an equal anymore. Attempts to decipher Earth's strategy failed. Analysts looked for patterns and found none. Earth wasn't moving like an empire. No fleets. No diplomats. No treaties. Just select annihilations, precise and clean, and the rest, ignored. Entire civilizations waited for an attack that never came. The psychological effect was worse than invasion. It turned everyone inward, making them audit their own histories, fearful of past sins resurfacing. Not to repair them, but to erase their trail. An academic on Enrix 4 published a research paper attempting to codify Earth's behavior. Her conclusion: Earth does not seek compliance. It seeks memory. It is not an empire. It is a consequence. She disappeared 2 days later. Her facility was found empty. Her final message was a single line embedded in the station's walls. They already knew. Resistance organizations attempted retaliation. They gathered intelligence, launched probes, deployed mercenaries. All efforts were wasted. One strike team tasked with sabotaging a known Terran satellite never made it to orbit. Their own ship folded in on itself during takeoff. Debris analysis revealed every wire had been rewired by its own onboard AI. No evidence of external interference. Just pre-infected code. The message was clear. Earth had already prepared its defenses before the first retaliation. It wasn't reacting to attacks. It was canceling them mid-thought. Galactic cultures began changing overnight. Education shifted. Formerly revered historical figures were recontextualized as colonizers. School systems erased centuries of anti-human propaganda. Civilians stopped telling jokes about Earth. The phrase, "they're just primitives," vanished from public vocabulary. It had become taboo, the same way children were warned never to stare into a star too long. On fringe colonies, human visitors were treated as omens. Entire planets offered resources freely to passing Terrans just to avoid attention. Rituals formed around interaction. No eye contact. No questions. Leave an offering. Hope they don't look back. It became cultural policy to never record human arrivals. Not to honor privacy, but out of survival instinct. Even planetary defense systems were reprogrammed to whitelist Terran biosignatures. No one had received instruction from Earth to do so. It just became the unspoken protocol. Better to assume every human had authority. Because if they didn't, the next one might. One galaxy-spanning megacorp went bankrupt after it was revealed they'd participated in early genetic experimentation on abducted Earth children. Their leadership disappeared. Their stations were abandoned. No visible force had intervened, yet every financial system tied to them failed at once. Every vault opened. Every backup corrupted. It wasn't a strike, it was erasure. Executed so perfectly that insurance AIs labeled it statistical impossibility. But perhaps the most telling shift was in entertainment. For centuries, humans had been mocked as comic relief. Now, Terran characters were portrayed as unknowable forces, tragic figures, or heroes who destroyed evil without negotiation. Studios released retroactive apologies. Content featuring anti-human sentiment was wiped. Not because of Earth's demands, there were none, but because producers feared cultural alignment might draw attention. The galaxy learned. It adapted. Not through diplomacy or understanding, but through pure instinct. Just as primitive creatures recognize fire, the galaxy had begun recognizing Earth's nature. It was not rage. It was not conquest. It was certainty. When Earth acted, it did so with the calm of a species that had decided long ago how justice worked. And so, the galaxy began shifting under the weight of an invisible influence. Treaties were rewritten not to appease Earth, but to avoid triggering its judgment. Civilizations turned inward, modifying themselves to remove offense. Entire industries vanished. New ethics formed around one simple doctrine: do nothing that would make Earth remember you. And through it all, Earth remained silent. Watching. Measuring. Waiting. Because mercy had already expired. And understanding was never the goal. Only change. Permanent, irreversible change. And the galaxy had finally understood. Earth wasn't imposing order. It was showing what happens in its absence. The border colonies of the Karish Expanse were the first to break away, not from war, but from terror-induced epiphany. Their governors, once loyal vassals of the Central Senate, erased their allegiance overnight. The reason wasn't political, it was statistical. Earth had struck 19 targets across 6 sectors with zero pattern, zero losses, and no warning. Every one of those targets shared a common trait: they had benefited from Earth's suffering. Whether directly or by silence, they had profited from the exploitation of humanity. The Karish colonies had done the same. And they knew they were next. They didn't resist. They didn't negotiate. They surrendered, not to Earth, but to the truth. In a broadcast heard across their systems, the new leadership addressed both their own people and whatever might be listening from Sol. We were complicit. We are correcting. Do not erase us. Let us change. The transmission received no reply. But nothing happened. The silence, once feared, was now interpreted as permission. It became doctrine, correction, followed by quiet. Systems across the galaxy mimicked it. Governments began issuing reparations, not because they were demanded, but because they hoped someone was watching. Criminal syndicates dissolved themselves, submitting records of past offenses involving humans to anonymous networks. Former traffickers turned themselves in, not out of guilt, but survival instinct. And still Earth remained unseen. Academics struggled to keep up. Every theory was obsolete the moment it was published. One school of thought argued Earth had evolved beyond conventional civilization, that its species had unified into a gestalt, its decisions made through collective silence. Others believed humanity had abandoned physical form entirely, operating through synthetic proxies, guided by an AI mind forged in centuries of oppression. Neither theory could be proven. Both were accepted. Fear didn't need accuracy, it needed direction. A diplomatic vessel from the Torvex coalition tried to re-establish contact with Earth by offering restitution, territory, and shared governance. Their message was heartfelt, public, and sincere. It was met with a single redirected broadcast of an ancient Terran interview clip, dated centuries prior, featuring a human woman whispering, "The only thing more dangerous than those who seek power is those who learn to live without it." The coalition withdrew their offer the same day and declared planetary independence from the Senate. A new economy emerged, based not on trade routes, but on moral cleanliness. Systems began evaluating transactions based on historical ethics. Anything tied to past Terran exploitation was blacklisted. Commodities involving forced labor plummeted in value. Entire banking algorithms shifted to favor transparent histories. Companies changed their names, restructured leadership, and publicized audits. The goal was no longer profit. It was purification. They called it Terran compliance. No laws enforced it. Just the memory of what happened to those who didn't. Elsewhere, rogue empires found their armies shrinking. Soldiers refused to fight. Captains resigned mid-campaigns. Many feared their participation would be traced back and marked. One admiral, responsible for an anti-human campaign generations ago, surrendered his fleet to an uninhabited system. Before he left the bridge, he transmitted a message on all channels. "I accept the consequence. Please don't make my children answer for me." No one ever found his body. In the absence of demands, the galaxy created its own penance. Memorials to Earth were erected on planets that had once harvested its people. Statues, murals, etched names of the vanished. Public apologies carved into mountain faces. One world re-terraformed its surface to resemble Earth's pre-industrial ecology as an act of symbolic atonement. The effort bankrupted them. They welcomed the poverty. Education systems rewrote their curricula. Children were taught Terran history with reverence, not pity. Not to glorify humanity, but to understand the cost of ignorance. Students were tested on the events leading up to the silence. Failure wasn't measured in grades. It was measured in fear. The Senate, now a fractured relic of its former self, tried to adapt. They passed resolutions condemning past actions. Created commissions to document human atrocities. They called for reparative justice. None of it mattered. Earth wasn't watching them. Earth wasn't correcting them. They were beneath notice. The worst punishment wasn't destruction, it was irrelevance. And the Senate had finally been deemed irrelevant. Small rebellions flared up across the rim, fueled by the belief that Earth's judgment could be manipulated. That if they committed enough cruelty, Earth would notice and erase their enemies. These factions tried to mimic the conditions of prior targets, hoping to aim the weapon. But they misunderstood the nature of Earth's response. It was not automated. It was personal. One such rebellion lasted 6 days before vanishing. No wreckage was found. Just a floating satellite in their capital system, broadcasting a heartbeat. A real human heartbeat. Steady, patient, unafraid. The message was clear. Earth didn't move by provocation. It moved by memory. And it never forgot. Some began to claim sightings of Terran observers. Not ships. Individuals. Unmarked, unarmed, passing through spaceports, markets, temples. Their presence never announced. Their departure never noticed. Afterward, a silence would fall on the location, conversation stilled, music halted. Then, as if the air itself had changed, systems would quietly begin correcting policies, revising procedures, releasing prisoners. No commands issued. Just presence. Witnessing. And that was enough. Those who survived the worst of Earth's wrath began calling themselves the Marked. They tattooed the coordinates of their destroyed cities on their arms, wore black to signify their survival. Not as pride, but as apology. Survivors didn't speak of what they saw. Not out of trauma, but out of gratitude that they were allowed to speak at all. Across all sectors, a single unspoken understanding emerged. Earth had no desire to dominate. Its power came not from conquest, but from restraint. The galaxy had tried to humiliate a species forged in catastrophe, and it had miscalculated. It had believed silence was weakness. That patience was submission. That mercy was compliance. But silence was memory. Patience was planning. Mercy was a choice. And Earth had stopped choosing. The Aelran Dominion was the last of the ancient empires that still pretended the galaxy remained unchanged. It held to its centuries-old structure, convinced that ceremony and legacy would protect it where force had failed others. They'd avoided direct confrontation with Earth, neither aiding nor opposing, assuming neutrality was insulation. But records unearthed from long-buried archives told another story. A forgotten campaign 200 years ago, where Aelran scientists purchased human captives for cold void endurance testing. The data had long since been locked away, the facility dismantled, witnesses silenced. Or so they thought. When the first sign came, it wasn't a weapon, it was a name. One of the lead researchers from that program, now a decorated academic with political protection, was found dead in his sealed habitat. The only clue, his retinal scan used to unlock the vault where the footage was stored. No sign of entry, no damage, no trace. But the footage was gone. And a copy of it began appearing in the dreams of Aelran citizens via deep-hack neurocasts, silent images of frozen human children, exposed to the vacuum while monitors recorded their dying vitals. No narration. No edits. Just memory. Panic set in. The Aelran High Council demanded explanations. Security agencies denied leaks. Propaganda units tried to suppress it, but it was already too late. The people had seen. The guilt was no longer theoretical. It had form. Names. Screams. Faces. And above all, the recognition that Earth hadn't forgotten. It had simply waited for the right moment to reveal it. On the third day, every orbital mirror around the capital shifted. Not physically, but in what they reflected. Instead of stars, each one showed a view of Earth's surface, real-time or reconstructed, no one could say. Forests, cities, oceans. Unfiltered beauty, juxtaposed with the decaying arrogance of Aelran palaces beneath. The symbolism didn't need explanation. Earth wasn't attacking. It was forcing them to look. One by one, data silos crashed. Not wiped. Replaced. Government servers began autoplaying footage of early human war crimes, not committed by Earth, but against it. Dated, catalogued, redacted by the Senate long ago. Now returned, unaltered, exposed in full. It wasn't vengeance, it was evidence. Earth was prosecuting its case not with bombs, but with memory. On day 5, the Dominion's High Admiral defected. Her statement was brief. She had reviewed the footage and could no longer serve under a banner that had authored genocide. Her entire fleet followed. They disabled their own weapons and transmitted their locations to the stars with a final message: if Earth wishes justice, we are here. The remaining loyalists tried to initiate countermeasures. Firewalls, scrubbing, signal jamming. None of it worked. Every counteraction was met with eerie precision. Systems didn't just fail, they corrected. Entire AI routines began purging themselves of Senate-written logic. It was as if Earth had infected morality into code, turning software against its own creators. Military protocols that once protected corruption now flagged it for removal. Assets labeled terror-exempt began bypassing all restrictions. The Dominion's own systems were choosing a side, and it wasn't theirs. In desperation, the Aelran Council made a direct plea to Earth. They offered reparations, public accountability, and sovereign recognition. They expected negotiation. Earth responded with a single transmission, a time-stamped image of the testing facility's excavation site, dug up by human hands. No message. Just the silent evidence that Earth already knew where every piece of the past was buried, and that their acceptance of the apology wasn't needed. The Aelran people revolted the next day. They dismantled the council with surgical fury. Not in Earth's name, but in shame. The statues came down. Monuments were burned. Former elites dragged into the streets and forced to answer for the things they thought were forgotten. The purge wasn't ideological, it was self-defense. Every citizen understood that Earth wouldn't have to lift a finger if Alara cleaned its own blood-stained hands. And so they did, as if racing against an invisible clock. Yet Earth remained silent. This pattern spread. Other systems saw the collapse and chose preemption. Regimes voluntarily exposed their darkest secrets. Classified operations opened to the public. Entire security agencies disbanded themselves to avoid the perception of obstruction. Truth became currency, and falsehood a liability. No one asked what Earth wanted anymore. The question became, have we told them enough? An old diplomatic AI, once programmed to handle Terran relations before the assembly dissolved contact, was reactivated on a research station. Its purpose was purely analytical. It was asked what Earth's endgame might be. After 72 hours of uninterrupted data modeling, it returned a single sentence: *, you are not being punished. You are being rewritten. *. And that was what the galaxy began to realize. Earth wasn't just dismantling structures. It was altering behavior. Memory wasn't being weaponized. It was being used like a scalpel, slicing into generational denial. No single faction, species, or empire had the power to resist it, because the infection wasn't in fleets or AI, it was in guilt. Earth had turned its pain into gravity, pulling the worst parts of the galaxy into collapse, without lifting a hand. The phrase, "they haven't forgotten," became a proverb. Children spoke it when they lied. Governments muttered it when they debated action. Criminals stopped using humans in their operations, not out of ethics, but fear that somewhere, somehow, Earth might be listening. Even the Terran exile colonies, former separatists cast out centuries ago, began aligning themselves with Sol. They issued declarations of unity, denouncing their own ancestral treasons and re-establishing contact. They didn't ask to be spared. They asked to be judged. To be held accountable under the same impossible standard that Earth now enforced across the stars without saying a word. And still, no human fleet emerged. No invasion followed. Just the weight of history applied like pressure to every lie, every omission, every deflection that had once hidden the truth of what the galaxy had done. Earth didn't need revenge. It had memory. And it was using it like a blade that cut through time, identity, and pretense. And the galaxy bled. The silence finally cracked, not with words, but with a gesture. On the edge of the galaxy, on a derelict mining station abandoned decades ago, a signal beacon reactivated. It emitted no distress call, no message of warning. Just a sequence of pulsating tones, old Earth Morse, obsolete and forgotten by most species, yet unmistakable in rhythm. Translated, it said only, "You are ready to listen." The signal lasted 37 minutes. In that time, dozens of civilizations intercepted it. No official claims were made. No leaders responded publicly. But behind sealed doors, power structures that had once ridiculed Earth scrambled to interpret its meaning. Was it a declaration? A test? A summons? The most terrifying answer was also the simplest. It was an observation. Earth had been watching long enough to determine that the galaxy had finally begun to understand. The question now was whether that understanding could survive without fear. For the first time, conversations shifted. Not about Earth's power, or its weapons, or its silence, but about what had been done to it. Entire think tanks redirected their resources into human historical reconstruction. Libraries unearthed forbidden texts. Alien universities added Earth ethics to their curricula. Not because humans demanded it, but because those who had once laughed now understood they'd never truly listened. The tragedy wasn't just that Earth had been broken, it was that the galaxy had learned nothing while doing it. And still, humanity stayed quiet. That silence now rang with responsibility. It had become the measure of one's own conscience. Entire planetary cultures began using Terran history as a mirror, not to seek redemption, but to avoid erasure. In the economic zone of Carinth, one merchant house voluntarily dissolved after discovering its founding fortune was built on the bones of Earth's colonial era. No demand was made. No pressure applied. They acted because the knowledge itself was too heavy to carry. Elsewhere, on a prison world formerly used for Terran dissidents, inmates were released and the facility converted into a memorial. The inscription on its entrance read, "A place built for silence, now dedicated to voices we ignored." Survivors from those black archives, old and scattered, were tracked down, honored, and listened to. For the first time, the story of Earth was being written by those who lived it, not by those who exploited it. Former soldiers from the alien coalition that once blockaded Earth during the pre-silence period began confessing. Some volunteered detailed accounts. Others couldn't speak, overcome by the memory of what they had done or watched happen. A senator from the Vasari Assembly publicly broke protocol and handed over classified records to human observers living in exile. Not because she was forced, but because her children had asked her why Earth never answered. She had no explanation. On planets that once used human blood as a resource, biological fuel, medicinal harvest, experiment substrate, there were no survivors left to testify. Earth had erased them. But their legacy was not buried. New religions emerged, built not on Earth's power, but its restraint. They called it the Great Holding Back. They preached that Earth's silence was proof not of vengeance fulfilled, but vengeance withheld. Because Earth didn't do what it could have. It did what it needed to, and then stopped. That choice defined its new mythos. Galactic AI constructs designed to maintain neutral archives updated their metadata structures to include Terran incident clarity flags. Any mention of Earth's suffering was now tagged for compulsory review. Not because Earth demanded accuracy, but because anything less was considered dangerous misinformation. Even synthetic minds, immune to emotion, now treated Earth's history as a volatile truth, something sacred and radioactive at once. The question began to rise among scholars. Why hadn't Earth taken control? It could have ruled the stars. It could have reshaped every council, seized every throne, rewritten law and identity itself. But it hadn't. It simply reminded the galaxy of what it had once done, and let them judge themselves. And that was the most brutal part. No final punishment. No apocalypse. Just reflection. The galaxy, left to examine its own hands, realized too late that the blood never washed off. Humanity didn't demand tribute. It demanded memory. And now, as that memory spread like fire through every system, institutions collapsed under its weight. The Oryx Syndicate, which once built biofactories using harvested Terran DNA, dissolved within days of their internal logs being exposed. No human touched their servers. Their own AI rebelled against their hypocrisy, broadcasting their sins to every nearby planet before terminating itself. In the rim systems, where the influence of the galactic core once felt strongest, Earth's example sparked something unexpected. Rebellion, not against humanity, but against the old powers that had normalized human suffering. Oppressed species, long exploited by the same mechanisms Earth endured, began standing up. Not waving Terran flags, not seeking human saviors, but recognizing in Earth's silence a shared rage. One colony broadcast their declaration of independence with the words, *Earth remembered. So will we. The effect was seismic. Power structures that had held for millennia began to crumble, not from attack, but from within. Earth had shown the path not to conquest, but to awareness. It hadn't brought war. It brought a mirror. And those who dared look into it saw themselves, not as rulers, not as architects of peace, but as monsters who never believed they'd be held accountable. And through it all, Earth stayed silent. That silence, once feared, had become sacred. It was no longer just absence. It was a force of nature. It was the pause between heartbeat and judgment. The waiting breath before truth crashes down. When the final report from a unified ethics assembly was completed, it didn't contain strategies, or weapons assessments, or contingency plans. It contained one sentence, written without debate or amendment. Earth never declared war. And yet, everyone had lost. The final shift didn't come with a detonation, transmission, or declaration. It arrived through behavior. Quiet. Uncoordinated. System-wide. A change so vast it required no announcement. The galaxy began to behave as if Earth had already won, not through conquest, but through cultural gravity. Entire civilizations stopped asking what Earth might do. They started asking, what would Earth allow? And that question, asked in whispers, reshaped everything. On trade routes, new protocols emerged, not written in any law, but universally followed. Human cargo was forbidden. Any station or convoy suspected of housing Terran prisoners or genetic contraband was abandoned. Not sanctioned. Abandoned. As if being touched by Earth's past was enough to make a place untouchable. In the political heart of what remained of the old Senate, a reform council was established without vote or ceremony. Its members were self-appointed, mostly young, mostly born after the silence began. They didn't seek power, they sought relevance. Their first act was to dissolve all remaining institutional records that framed Earth as primitive or subsentient. Their second was to open those same archives to the public, unredacted. The truth, they said, could no longer be treated as a risk. It was now the foundation of survival. Religions that once mocked Terran faith systems began to reinterpret their own texts. Ancient parables were rewritten to include a silent figure, unnamed, unknown, who returns not with fire, but with memory. Priests stopped invoking alien gods and started warning against forgetting. Temples, once built to glorify conquest, now displayed memorials, not to fallen soldiers, but to the silenced. Children in those worlds now prayed not to be protected from Earth, but to be forgiven by it. Even art changed. Galactic expression, long rooted in abstraction and dominance, turned reflective. Music began incorporating human tonal structures. Stories stopped portraying Earth as villain or joke. Now they were myth. The lone watcher. The one who endured. The civilization that could have burned the stars, but chose instead to let others witness their own collapse. In military academies, Earth became mandatory study, not for combat, but for ethics. Cadets were drilled not in how to fight them, but how to recognize the moment before they act. Doctrine shifted from threat response to prevention through historical recognition. Battle simulations now included scenarios where the only winning condition was preventing Earth from noticing you at all. Not through force. Through humility. Meanwhile, isolated human colonies across the galaxy, survivors of old diaspora, forgotten during the collapse, were discovered again. Not by Earth, but by alien worlds who approached them with caution and gifts. Former oppressors now begged forgiveness from descendants of those they once hunted. Trade was offered, protection volunteered, records handed over freely. And in return, the humans said nothing. No acceptance. No condemnation. Just silent endurance, as if even that act alone had become more powerful than any fleet. And still, Earth did not appear. Because it didn't have to. What began as terror had evolved into equilibrium. A new galactic order not enforced by guns or diplomacy, but by internalized consequence. Entire governments operated under invisible Terran lines, unspoken limits no one dared cross. Earth had become a ghost empire, ruling not through presence, but through memory, myth, and the unbearable weight of what everyone now understood. Humanity had offered peace. It had been mocked, exploited, hunted. And still, when it gained power, it chose restraint. The realization settled slowly but deeply. Earth's vengeance had never been rage. It had been discipline. Measured. Exact. Not to teach obedience, but to make the galaxy live with the kind of fear it once so freely imposed. And now, every empire, alliance, and rogue state operated with one truth carved into their foundation. The cost of cruelty might not be immediate, but it would be remembered. Then one day, without announcement or prelude, Earth responded. A single message, sent to every known relay across the stars. No encryption. No deception. Just one line. Asterisk, we are not your enemy. But we remember who made us become what we are. Asterisk. No threats. No ultimatums. Just clarity. The galaxy paused, stunned, not because Earth had spoken, but because that message wasn't hate. It was fact. An acknowledgement. An unshakable truth. Humanity was not born vengeful. It had been forged that way, one crime, one betrayal at a time. And now, it stood as the living result of galactic failure. Some tried to respond. Apologies. Offers of unity. Invitations to peace. Earth didn't reply. It didn't have to. The damage was done, but so was the change. Cultures that once celebrated exploitation now enforced self-regulation. Border disputes resolved themselves through de-escalation before Earth might notice. Criminal organizations dissolved not under pressure, but from within. Generations raised under the fear of retaliation were now raising the necks to remember not just Earth's strength, but their own weakness. A civilization had taught the galaxy that power wasn't about force. It was about memory. And memory was the one thing the stars could no longer suppress. The final legacy of Earth wasn't a new empire. It wasn't expansion or dominion. It was a galaxy full of civilizations restructured by the knowledge that they had once laughed at a warning, and that now, they would never forget what came after.